Apple, Google, Silicon Valley in general, that whole story has been the dominant story of innovation since probably the late 80s, and it's one that people all over the world are trying to copy with silicon this and silicon that. And it's a story which is that innovation is essentially about competition, it's about competitive advantage, it's about using new technologies and the freedom to have new ideas. All of that, I think, is amazing, fantastic, but it's only one story. And there might be a different story. And the different story and why it might be relevant comes from a set of other factors that we should bear in mind. And the first is that we live in a world of tightening, if not severe, constraints, particularly perhaps water, but also forms of energy, precious materials and others. And at a more prosaic level, in the developed world, most people on middle incomes are not going to see their incomes rise very much. The driving force of innovation in the post-war era in this economy, which was the aspirational middle class, are not going to be the beneficiaries of huge increases in real incomes. In the developing world, it's people earning $5 to $10 a day and perhaps eking out small bits that they can invest in precious goods and services that really count to them. So I think one of the big factors in the world is constraint. The second thing is rising aspirations. The most potent force of social and economic change is that roughly 70 million people a year are moving to cities. What's pulling people to cities? It's the possibility of better jobs, better houses, better education, better outcomes. The third factor going in our favour is that we have apparently, blessed with technology, now limitless opportunities for collaboration. And those opportunities to collaborate in new ways, to create new models of organisation, to share resources and to create things together in more imaginative ways is the greatest abundant resource that we have. And so the task of innovators, I think, is going to be about how you meet severe constraints to meet rising aspirations using these opportunities for collaboration. What's the rub of that? The rub is you can't do that without challenging the status quo. And so as a result, the world becomes more uncertain. And so again, this means that innovation, the capacity to act in the face of uncertainty, becomes really, really critical. This is literally the most creative, radical, revolutionary man that I've ever met. And his name is Madhav Chavan, and he's the founder of Pratham, now arguably the largest and most influential educational NGO in India. And what Madhav did was take an idea that had emerged from the Mumbai University's School of Social Work to create low-cost preschool playgroups. And Madhav is not an educationalist. His background was in trade union organising, and he brought to that challenge the sensibility of a trade union organiser. He thought the challenge here is to grow a movement, it's not to just provide a service. And I've got no resources. How do I do it? And so what he came up with was a way to create low-cost preschool, they're called balwadis, by training very quickly in a kind of pretty rough and ready way young women who'd graduated from school who themselves had limited opportunities to work, needed to work close to home for all sorts of reasons, but with this kind of training and a little bit of help could create a small micro business out of their front room by educating 10, 15 children. So what Madhav and his team did was develop a resource that was underutilized and crying out for opportunity, piggybacking on existing facilities, using a lot of community input as well. Pratham has educated 21 million young people. It's 500,000 balwadis all across India. So it's a global phenomenon, but there are no big global brands. That's because they follow the same principles but apply those principles in different ways in different settings. So one of the lessons of Pratham is that this is not just small, this is scale. And it's scale because they adopted a very different kind of model. So these are people who have all, it seems to me, embodied this ability to think, here are binding constraints, really tough and difficult, here are rising aspirations, but if we can create new collaborative models which mobilize resources in new ways, then we can innovate, but that will mean challenging the status quo or thinking outside conventional channels. All sorts of people need to come together. They can come from all sorts of sources, but at its core, I think the people I met who are doing this are rooted cosmopolitans, by which I mean They have access to wider sources of knowledge and ideas and capital, but they're in a very particular place, and it's a place that they really belong to and identify with. And this sense of they are not grassroots entrepreneurs, they're not just in that place, they can connect to wider flows of ideas. Where will it happen? Again, it will happen in many different places, but by and large, you'll find them in margins and extremes. And they will use their marginality and their extremity to their advantage to create these new low-cost models. And they will come from the most cosmopolitan cities in the developing world, which have these flows of knowledge and people going through them. And how will they do it? They'll do it in the real world with real consumers. They have no option. And they'll be very adept at learning. So I think this is a big part of our future, that we're going to need forms of innovation which are frugal, which use fewer resources to create better outcomes for more people. They'll often employ digital technology, not necessarily at their core, but use it. And they'll be designed for a world of severe and tightening constraints, rising aspirations, and limitless possibilities of collaboration. And it's the people who can triangulate that who will be, I think, the most important innovators of the decades to come.